"Nobody wants you," her sister mocked at the ball. Then the Mafia boss walked straight to her. Elena stood in front of the small bathroom mirror and stared at her reflection for a long moment. The dress was navy blue, floor length, bought from a thrift shop 2 months ago for $20. She had kept it in the back of her closet, waiting for some occasion that never seemed to come. Tonight was that occasion, and she still was not sure she wanted to go. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from her mother. "Don't be late. Camille needs us there by 8. She noticed her mother had not said she needed Elena there, just that Camille did. Elena picked up her purse, took one last look at herself, and walked out. The Whitmore Grand Hotel sat at the center of the city like a crown someone had forgotten to remove. Its marble columns were lit from below, and expensive cars lined up outside the entrance. Elena arrived in a cab, paid the driver, and stepped out alone. She had no one to arrive with. The inside of the hotel was even more impressive. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, waiters carrying drinks on silver trays, women in gowns that cost more than Elena's monthly rent. She recognized a few faces from the news. City officials, business owners, people who made decisions that affected thousands of people, and then went home to eat dinner without thinking much about any of it. Elena found a quiet corner near the far windows and stayed there. From here, she could see the city below, all the lights scattered across the dark like something someone had spilled and never cleaned up. She liked that view. It felt honest. It was less of a performance than the room behind her. "Elena." She turned around. Camille was walking toward her in a red dress that had clearly been designed by someone whose name Elena would not recognize, but whose price tag she definitely would. Her hair was done perfectly. She smiled with every tooth showing, the kind of smile that took practice. "I didn't think you'd actually come," Camille said, looking Elena up and down once. The look lasted only a second, but Elena had spent 27 years learning to read that look. It was the look that said, "You tried, but not quite enough." "Mother asked me to," Elena said simply. Camille stepped closer and lowered her voice just enough that it felt like something private, even though it was not. "Listen, try not to wander around and talk to people like you belong here, okay? Tonight is important. My engagement is the talk of the room, and people are watching." She paused and tilted her head slightly. "Nobody wants you here, Elena. Nobody ever wants you anywhere. Just stay in your corner and don't embarrass us." She said it, without cruelty in her voice. That was almost worse. She said it the way you state the weather, like it was simply, obviously true. Elena said nothing. She turned back to the window. She heard Camille's heels click away across the marble floor. Elena pressed one hand flat against the cold glass and breathed slowly. She was used to this. She had learned to be used to this over many years, but just because you are used to something does not mean it stops hurting. It just means you stop showing that it does. She had gotten very good at not showing it. She was still standing there, watching the city lights below, when she felt the room change. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like a shift in pressure, the kind you feel in your ears before a storm, or in a room when someone walks in who everyone else is very careful around. Voices got a little quieter. People stood a fraction straighter. The laughter in the room became more measured, more deliberate. Elena turned her head slightly and saw him. He was tall, dark-haired, wearing a black suit that looked like it had been made specifically for his shoulders and not borrowed from anyone else's wardrobe. He was not smiling. He moved through the room the way someone moves through a place they own. Unhurried, certain, without looking for anyone's approval. 2 men followed a step behind him. One leaned close and said something. He listened without changing his expression, then nodded once. She heard someone nearby whisper the name quietly, the way people say names they are a little afraid of. Ferrara. She did not know the full story. Nobody outside a certain circle ever did. But the name Dominic Ferrara was one of those names the city carried around like a bruise. Always present, always felt, but never talked about directly if it could be helped. He ran companies. He attended charity events. He shook hands with politicians and sat on the boards of respectable organizations. And beneath all of that, if even half the rumors were true, he ran something else entirely, something with a much longer shadow. Elena turned back to the window. She was not trying to avoid him. She simply was not interested in performing for powerful men, the way the rest of the room seemed to be doing quite eagerly. She went back to watching the quiet lights below. "You look like you'd rather be somewhere else." She turned. He was standing beside her, not 2 feet away. Up close, he looked less like a rumor and more like a person, which, she thought, somehow made him more unsettling. Not less. His eyes were dark and direct, and they were looking at her with a kind of careful, unhurried attention that she had not been prepared for. "I'd rather be home with a book," she said, because it was true. But coming seemed like the polite choice. He did not smile exactly, but something in his expression shifted slightly. "Most people in this room would not have said that to me. Most people in this room are trying to impress you. And you're not?" She looked at him honestly. "I don't know you well enough to want to impress you." A brief pause. Dominic Ferrara, Elena Voss. They shook hands. His grip was firm and brief. "What do you do, Elena?" "Accounting. Junior level. A firm downtown." "And do you like it?" The question surprised her. Most people, when they asked what she did, were already thinking about what they were going to say next. He seemed to actually be waiting for her answer. "I like the parts where I find mistakes that shouldn't be there," she said. "Numbers are honest. They don't try to be anything they're not." He considered that. "That's an interesting way to see it. What do you see it as?" "Control," he said simply. "Numbers tell you where everything is and exactly where it's going." "That's a lonelier way to see it," she replied. He did not answer that right away. Instead, he turned slightly toward the window beside her, and they both stood there for a moment, looking out at the city without either of them feeling the need to fill the silence. Elena could not remember the last time someone had allowed silence to simply exist between them, without rushing to cover it up with noise. She did not notice Camille approaching until she was already there. "Dominic Ferrara," Camille's voice came from just behind her. Bright, warm, perfectly practiced. "What a lovely surprise. I'm Camille Voss. I don't think we've officially met." She slipped her arm through Elena's in one smooth and completely uninvited motion. "I hope my sister hasn't been boring you. She tends to blend into the wallpaper at these kinds of events." She laughed softly, and the laugh was very carefully designed to sound harmless. Dominic turned to look at Camille. He held her gaze for exactly a few seconds, and something in his expression went entirely flat. Not hostile, not rude, just completely empty of interest. The way someone looks at a sign they have already read and have no reason to read again. Then he looked back at Elena. "She's the only interesting person I've spoken to tonight," he said. The words were not dramatic. They were not said to be kind, or to make a point, or to win anything. He said them the way he seemed to say everything, as a plain, simple fact. Camille's smile stayed on her face, but it stopped reaching her eyes. She laughed once, said something polite and meaningless, and excused herself. Elena watched her cross back through the room, toward where their mother was standing near the bar. She saw her mother look up. She saw Camille lean in and whisper something. Her mother glanced over at Elena with an expression that was not quite pride and not quite confusion. Elena turned back to Dominic. "You didn't have to say that," she said quietly. "I didn't say it to be kind," he replied. "I said it because it was true. I don't say things I don't mean." She looked at him for a moment. "That must make conversation difficult. It makes it shorter." She smiled, just slightly. It was the first time all evening she had smiled at anything real. They talked for another 30 minutes or so. Not about important things exactly, about the city, about what she read, about why she thought most events like this one raised far less money than people assumed, about how much of the room was theater, and how little of it was genuine. He listened with that same careful attention, asking questions when he had them, not asking them when he didn't. He didn't try to be charming. He didn't try to fill every space with himself. He was simply present in a way that felt unusual, and if she was being completely honest, a little strange to be on the receiving end of after so many years of being overlooked. The evening wound down slowly. The music got quieter. The crowd began to thin. Dominic walked with her toward the lobby, not because she asked him to, and not making any kind of production of it. They walked the way two people walk when walking together simply makes sense, and neither of them feels the need to explain why. In the lobby, under the high vaulted ceiling, he stopped. "I'm having a small dinner next week," he said. "Private. A few people I actually want to speak to." A pause. "You should come." She looked at him steadily. "Why?" He thought about that for a moment, and she appreciated that he actually thought about it instead of answering right away. Because you didn't try to be someone else tonight. I haven't had a conversation that felt real in a long time. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. He reached into his jacket pocket and held out a card. Simple, white, just a name and a number printed in clean black ink. She took it. Good night, Elena. Good night. He walked out through the front doors of the hotel, and she stood in the lobby for a brief moment before stepping outside herself into the cool night air. The cab ride home was quiet. The city passed by outside the window. The same city it had always been. But it felt slightly different, the way things sometimes feel different after something small has shifted, even when you cannot quite name what it was. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. What were you doing talking to Dominic Ferrara for half the evening? Camille was upset. That was embarrassing. Elena read it once. Then she set the phone face down on her knee. She reached into her small purse and took out the card he had given her. She held it between two fingers and looked at it. A plain white card, simple print. Nothing about it that should have meant anything at all. But she kept thinking about the moment he had crossed the room. The entire ballroom had been watching him walk in, and he had moved right past everyone who was hoping he would stop. Past the politicians, past the business owners, past the women in expensive gowns who had been waiting all evening for exactly that moment. And he had stopped beside a girl in a second-hand navy dress who was standing at a window, watching city lights, and wishing she was home with a book. She did not know what Dominic Ferrara wanted. She did not know if stepping into his world was a wise choice or a foolish one, or something she would look back on later and not be able to explain. She knew what people said about the Ferrara name. She was not the kind of person who pretended not to hear things, but she also knew something simpler than all of that. Something quieter. For the first time in longer than she was willing to count, someone had walked into a room full of people, looked past all of them, and found her worth crossing the floor for. She pressed the card flat between her palms and looked out the window at the city passing by. She was still thinking about it when the cab pulled up to her building, and she stepped out into the quiet, ordinary night, completely alone, but somehow, for the first time in a very long time, not feeling like it. End.